Okay, so next we discuss virtualization. So as given here, virtualization is a technique which allows to share single physical instance of an application or resource among multiple organizations or tenants, that is customers. It does so by assigning a logical name to a physical resource and providing a pointer to that physical resource on demand. So let us understand this concept here using a diagram by looking at a diagram given here. So what is virtualization actually? Whenever you want to make one single physical instance available to multiple users, okay, so whenever one physical instance, one physical machine needs to be made available to multiple end users, this is achieved through virtualization. So how is it achieved? So what is done actually? The physical instance can be, it can be any, or the operating system and the hardware resources. So all this particular physical instance needs to be made available to the end users by creating some multiple logical instances. So here on top of this physical instance, we create some multiple logical instances. So these logical instances are nothing but the virtual machines to cater to each user that has requested for resources or application from the physical instance. Okay, virtualization enables creation of some virtual machines, which are some logical instances of the same physical instance, and each such virtual machine will cater to the services requested for by the end user. Now, how is it done? How are these virtual machines created? Okay, so that we will understand through the next diagram. So basically what happens is virtualization makes use of a very important concept. Okay, it's a program which we call the hyperuser. So this hyperuser is that software that we feed in to the physical machine, and this hyperuser enables creation of the different virtual machines, and each of these machines are now ready to serve the end users. Okay, so the hypervisor is also called the virtual machine monitor. Why? Because along with creating virtual machines, hypervisor is also responsible for managing and monitoring the virtual machines. That is why the hypervisor is also called virtual machine monitor, or in short VMM. Okay, now there are again two terminologies that you need to be familiar with. First is the host machine and next is the guest machine. So here it's already mentioned here, the machine on which the virtual machine is created is known as the host machine. So here the machine that I'm using, the physical instance or the physical machine that I have, this is my host machine, and on top of this host machine the hypervisor has created multiple virtual machines. So these virtual machines are nothing but the guest machines. So how these work, you see, as we know that we are talking about cloud computing, so multiple users will be requesting for services, will be requesting for resources from a physical instance. Now this physical instance, with the help of hypervisor, has created some virtual machines to cater to the demands of the users. So the virtual machine is actually one kind of a middleman between the physical instance and the user. It kind of acts as a bridge between the end user and the physical instance. Okay, and all these are connected via the internet. Okay, the virtual machines and the users are connected by the, you see, when the user suppose request for when the user would request for any application or any resource, then it would simply request the virtual machine, because the user can directly interact with the virtual machine. It is the intermediator. Okay. Now this virtual machine will request for all the services asked by the user. Okay, it will try to retrieve all the services, all the applications and resources that has been asked by the user one to the physical instance. The physical instance will accordingly make it ready, and it will, you know, respond back to the virtual machine. Now the virtual machine has got all those resources that it needed to serve the end user. Okay, so this is how the virtualization works. This is how users are provided with the request. They are provided with the services. Now let us understand this in a broader way. So below we have the cloud computing architecture here. Okay, so talking about cloud computing architecture, so see, in the previous diagram, in the previous figure, we simply spoke about virtualization. So here we had a single physical instance. But talking about cloud computing, okay, there can be several resources starting with servers. There can be multiple servers. There can be desktops. Okay, there can be softwares, applications, platforms, storage. So these are the components of the cloud computing infrastructure. Okay, so all these resources, all these components can be requested for by an end user, and the cloud computing is connected to the end user. Okay, so this is the end user side. Okay, if you can see, these are networks. The end users are connected via routers or switches. Okay, this is the end user side, or the front end, you can say, where the clients or the consumers are present, and this is the back end. Okay, so the back end is nothing but the cloud computing infrastructure. So this cloud computing infrastructure is connected to the front end via the internet. Okay, so as we have already known by now, that the end users can simply make use, okay, of the services from the service providers. The only thing that they have to do is they have to request for services to the service providers. The service providers will, get them ready, and they will respond back with the results to the end users. Okay, so this is the basic cloud computing architecture. Now let's see how virtualization cloud model looks like. Okay, how the virtualization works in cloud. You see, this is one figure. Okay, here this is the cloud provider which is connected to the internet. Okay, then we have the end user here, which again is connected to the internet, and then we have the entire infrastructure. We have the entire setup here. Okay, the hardware infrastructure, we have it here. Okay, now whenever the end user would request for any service via internet to the cloud service provider, then the cloud service provider, so first you see here, okay, just first you see here, this is the hardware infrastructure. So below we have the hardware infrastructure. It can be, hardware infrastructure. So what can be there? There can be the storage, network, okay, the operating systems. There can be different applications also, networks. So all these will be in here. Okay, on top of this, as we have seen already, on top of this we have the virtualization infrastructure, which is the hypervisor, okay, which enables virtualization. So we have the hypervisor here. So this hypervisor will create different virtual machines as per the demands of as per the number of users to cater, okay, on the client side. And these virtual machines may have different types of operating systems in them. They can have different applications in them. For example, let us consider, say, the first machine here has Windows operating system, and suppose it has got the email application. The next we have, suppose, Linux operating system in virtual machine 2, and suppose there's a database server. Okay, then in the third, again, suppose we have Linux operating system and we have the MS Office here. So accordingly, based on the request of different end users, okay, the cloud service provider will enable, okay, it will provide the different resources or applications as requested available to the virtual machines. Okay, so whenever the end user would request for any resource or any application, these machines, okay, these machines would request the same from the hardware infrastructure. Then the hardware infrastructure would give them back, you know, whatever they needed. And likewise, all these virtual machines, all the applications and resources as given to the, you know, virtual machines can now be retrieved by the end user. Fine. So this is how actually virtualized cloud model works. Okay. So here I have given you all the notes regarding the basics of virtualization. You can simply go through it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so welcome to the third lecture of cloud security. Well, in the very first two lectures, we have already covered the cloud computing basics. We have gone through the service and delivery models. Then we went through virtualization basics. Yes. So today we will be learning about virtualization security concerns. Fine. Okay. So before starting with the session, I would just like to say that you know, this lecture will purely be based on the OpenStack environment. Okay, it will purely be on OpenStack environment. So you know what OpenStack is? Yes, it is basically a free open standard cloud computing platform. Okay, which was developed by Rackspace and NASA. Fine. And examples are such as Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, the Red Hat OpenStack platform, etc. So we'll basically talk about the OpenStack here. Okay, so starting with the class. Okay. So first we will discuss, as said, we'll be discussing on the virtualization security concerns. Okay. So first we start with the hypervisor security. Okay, so well, you know what hypervisor is. Yes, it is the process of ensuring, sorry, it is the software that enables virtualization. Yes, it is the software that actually emulates the hardware. Okay, it leads to creation of virtual CPUs, virtual RAM, virtual disk, etc. So we have known by now what hypervisor is. Then hypervisor security is the process of ensuring the hypervisor is secure throughout the life cycle. Okay, this includes during development and in implementation also. So some common practices are, for example, limiting the number of users in a local system. Okay, so it is very important to, you know, have limited number of users in order to have a strong, you know, security. Then limiting the attack surfaces and also keeping all systems updated. Now, security with hypervisors can become a large concern. For example, let us consider a scenario. Say, you know, if an attacker gains unauthorized access to the hypervisor, okay, which is the virtual machine monitor or the software which, you know, coordinates the entire virtual environment, then what would happen? You know, they would have access to every virtual machine under the hypervisor's control. So the attacker could then gain access to all the data stored in each virtual machine. Additional points of vulnerability also include shared hardware caches, the network, as well as the access to the physical server. Okay, so these might be the different types of you know, attacks if you know, an attacker gets unauthorized access to the hypervisor. So implementing hypervisor security with, you know, it will help security professionals and administration ensure the protection against such intrusions during development, implementation, provisioning management, and deprovisioning management. Okay. Next, we talk about hypervisor security techniques and best practices. So, we discuss some of the best practices. So first being the just wait. Okay. So first being that numerous methods exist to help protect hypervisors, including practices such as using additional monitoring and network security tools, minimizing attack surfaces, setting access privilege, updating the hypervisor, and keeping the physical server out of reach from unauthorized individuals. Next would be using monitoring and network security tools to allow administrators to monitor their virtual environments and detect any unusual behavior, okay, early. So monitoring tools such as SolarWinds incorporation, then we have VMware. These can help monitor and detect attacks. So administrators can use such tools, some additional tools such as firewalls for network security tools. Okay. Third, we have minimizing potential attack surfaces will make it more difficult to access a virtual system by decreasing potential access points. So, many operating systems or hypervisor will have, additive features that an organization may not need or use, which will increase the attack surface of a virtual machine. So to minimize the threat surfaces, administrators should disable the unnecessary services and only allow services needed for successful operation. Okay, and this includes disconnecting the unused physical hardware from the host systems. Then the fourth is a system administrator should also set restrictions to who can have remote and console access to the hypervisor. This practice will also limit who can control the settings of the hypervisor and will prevent unauthorized users from changing or accessing information. Okay, then we have installing patches and updates to the hypervisor as the vendor releases them. In it is another way to ensure hypervisor security. Updates released by the hypervisor's vendor may contain security patches or additional security features. So automatic updates are a setting available to most hypervisors for users. And lastly, we have blocking access to physical servers. Okay, as the access to physical server is relatively easier to access the hypervisors. Okay, so this was all about the hypervisor security and the best practices. Next, we talk about the host security. So let's see what we have here, where we have a question. Are you certain that your host level security is secure enough to run the software that you depend on? If there is a security weakness in the hosts of your software, you will be vulnerable regardless of the security you use or design into your software. So basically you see, host is what we know what the host is. So virtual machines always run on the on top of physical instances, and those physical instances we call as the host machines. Yes. So here this basically describes about the security in host level. So host level security is actually easy to focus on the security of the software we use, and you know um, forget about the hardware and software that hosts it, such as our desktops, our laptops, mobile devices, the operating systems and configurations. Okay, so strong host security addresses the key aspects of your hosts, including hardware, software, server, and storage components. It ensures we are equipped to defend ourselves against, okay, and appropriately respond to cyber attacks when they occur. So basically, host security, all security measures that can be applied to the operating system. Okay, so basically host is nothing but our own operating system. So all security measures that can be implemented to the operating system, okay, such practices can be implemented here as well. So next we talk about the secure communication between the guest and guest instances. Now, okay. you see two virtual machines. Okay, guest instances are the virtual machines. Okay, so two virtual machines can also communicate faster than two separate physical computer systems. And for faster inter-virtual machine communication makes it possible for two machines to cooperate with each other for security purposes without impacting the performances. So you see, basically talking about the users. Okay, users of virtualization. So we basically have three types of users. Okay, the administrator, who is also the root user, you can say. Then we have the service users, who are actually allocated, mainly they are mainly allocated for projects. These are the dedicated users, to whom projects are being allocated. Fine. And then thirdly, we have the normal users, who are who perform only the read only operations. Okay, they work on read only mode. Now you see, so basically talking about the service users. Okay, so since service users are always allocated dedicated project by the administrator. Fine. So security is already being maintained provided the users are allocated projects in a secured way. Fine. And also that every instance we're talking about. Okay, every guest instance that we're talking about, they have their own operating systems. Fine. And therefore their own firewall policies as well. So all these firewalls must be configured accordingly in the instances. Fine. Next, we talk about the secure communication between guest and host. Okay, so many virtual machine environments supports file sharing between um, host and guests. Okay, allowing for a convenient way to link the two systems together and move files between them in a relatively seamless fashion. So the guest and the host can communicate. So one way of communicating is for file sharing. Okay, so they can communicate for sharing files between one another. But you see, however, such file sharing might introduce security risk. For example, say a compromised guest, okay, gets access to a host file system and alters all the directories that are explicitly configured for sharing with a guest. Okay, so such security flaws could lead to the exploitation of the host machine or also the hypervisor. Fine. So uh, you know we can so therefore, unless there is a business need that explicitly requires the virtual machine file sharing, this functionality should be disabled. Okay, file sharing should be disabled unless there is utmost requirement of it. And secondly, appropriately enabling inbound and outbound ports in security groups. So what are inbound and outbound ports actually? You see, if if a guest communicates with the host, it is called the outbound. Okay, and if the host communicates with the guest, it is called the inbound. And talking about security groups, well, there are basically two types of security groups. One is the inbuilt firewall of every system, and then we have the firewall as a service, which we also call the FWAAS. Okay, you might have heard about it. Well, so you know what a firewall is. Yes, a firewall is basically a security product that filters out the malicious traffic. So firewalls have they run in between a trusted internal network and an untrusted network. For example, between a private network and the internet. And the firewall blocks and allow network traffic according to an internal set of rules. Okay, so that is the basic definition for the firewalls. Okay, every system has their own inbuilt firewalls. Now talking about the second security group, which is the firewall as a service. So basically, let's understand what a cloud firewall is. So for example, say banks have a lot of, let us consider one example. Okay, banks have a lot of physical security in place. Okay, Now they will include security features like, say, security cameras. Then they might have bulletproof glasses. Now security guards and bank employees also help stop potential thieves, and cash is stored in highly secure safes. But imagine if, instead of being kept in one place, each bank branch's cash was stored in different safes all over the country that were operated by a company specializing in safe maintenance. So how could the bank be sure that its money was secure without deploying additional security resources around its scattered safes? Okay, so this is what actually cloud firewalls do. So the cloud is like a bank, okay, with scattered resources, but instead of money, the cloud stores data and computational power. Yes, and authorized users can connect to the cloud from anywhere and on almost any network. So applications that run in the cloud can be running anywhere, and that also applies to cloud platforms and infrastructure. Now, cloud firewalls block cyber attacks directed as these cloud assets. So, as the name implies, a cloud firewall is that firewall which is hosted in the cloud. Fine. So, the cloud-based firewalls form a virtual barrier around cloud platforms, infrastructure, and applications, just like the traditional firewalls. Okay, to form a barrier around the organization's internal network. So deploying a cloud firewall is like replacing a bank's local security cameras and a physical security guard with a global 24/7 security center that has a centralized staff, okay, and security camera feeds from all places where a bank's assets are stored. So this is all about the firewall as a service. So basically, so speaking about the two security groups, okay, and so one way of enhancing secure communication between guest and host is to implement the inbound outbound ports in security groups, okay, in the cloud computing environment, and enable them appropriately. Okay, so this is all about the virtual security concerns.